Hello, welcome to Papa Nick's Music. I am, as always, your host, Papa Nick Lewis, and today we're talking a little bit about politics. I warned you last week. I actually was planning to do a completely different video this week, but then we had a sliver of insanity earlier in the week, and I thought, okay, well, I can still make the point about that, and who knows, I might do the originally intended video at some point in the future. But if you've been living under a rock or in a cave for the last week, you may not know that Bruce Springsteen doesn't much care for Donald Trump. I know. It's amazing. Also, just in case you were curious, water is wet and, yeah, shit stinks. There are certain things we shouldn't have to be told. And one of them is that Bruce Springsteen doesn't much care for Donald Trump. And I'm amazed, first off, that anybody was surprised by this revelation. I mean, the only way you can be ignorant of Bruce Springsteen's politics is if you've never heard anything that he's recorded after, say, 1980. Just while we're on this topic, I've always been entertained, amazed by people who believe that Born in the USA is a patriotic song. It's just like, wow. Every time I come across somebody, it does not happen often, but every time I come across somebody who thinks that Born in the USA is a patriotic song, I always imagine the Gary Larson Far Side comic, where we've got a dog owner who is chastising his dog and is telling the dog, blah blah. This is what I don't want you to do this, Ginger. Whatever. So the top half of the panel is the guy shaking his finger and talking to the dog. The bottom half is what the dog hears, and what the dog hears is blah 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 blah. Ginger, blah 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 blah. I think of that comic every time somebody even remotely suggests that Born in the USA is a patriotic song, because it's got to be that they're hearing blah 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 blah. Born in the USA. That's the only way you can think it's patriotic. But I digress. So we had this kerfuffle earlier in the week when it turns out that Bruce Springsteen introduced one of his songs in his, as he was making a stop in the UK on his current tour, and in the intro to the song made it clear that he was apologetic to the rest of the world that we have this doofus as our president. And the doofus found out about it and, issued one of his irrational, hysterical, I'm not even sure what the hell to call it. He calls them truths. There are lengths that my hypocrisy will go to, but not quite that far yet. But he had his little tantrum, and the following evening, Bruce Springsteen introduced songs the same way. And I read earlier today, I'm recording this as of Thursday, May 22nd. Earlier today, it was announced that he was releasing an EP of the concert dialogue, discussion, whatever the hell we call that thing, which I think is hilarious. Anyway, so this thing happened this week, and I thought it was an interesting thing to talk about. But before I get into it, I want to make clear I am not intending anything that I say to be construed as in any way criticizing the MAGA faithful for turning on Bruce Springsteen. I don't care. I have no problem at all with, if you're a MAGA person, what the hell are you doing watching this video? If you're a MAGA faithful and you've decided that you are going to disown the boss, that is fine with me. I get it. I understand it. If the roles were reversed, if I found out that one of my favorite singers turned out to be a devoted member of the MAGA tribe, I'd lose a lot of respect for that singer, and chances are good I wouldn't burn the CDs because I'm not a Neanderthal. But I'd probably cull those CDs out and put them in a box for the next time I go to half-price books. So, I understand the tendency. So I'm not necessarily, I'm not talking about that today. But there are some things about this situation that I think are worth exploring. So first, we've got Donald Trump and the art of the distraction. The conventional wisdom among people who, blather about this sort of stuff. I'm not necessarily talking about I'm not talking about the top of the line pundits. I'm talking more about people like people on YouTube and shit like that. Tend to frame this sort of thing as Donald Trump, the master manipulator. Isn't it funny how now that we're talking about Bruce Springsteen, we're not talking about that Qatari jet anymore. We aren't talking about the big, beautiful bill that just passed the House. We're talking about Bruce Springsteen. Donald Trump does this every time. He gets us distracted talking about things that aren't important. Blah, blah, blah. Except, no. We are still talking about the Qatari jet. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa very skillfully skewered Trump in that attempted Oval Office ambush that blew up in Trump's face, which I just loved watching. Anyway, President Ramaphosa was able to get a pretty good zinger in on Trump about how he, Ramaphosa, wished he had or didn't have a jet to offer to Trump. Loved that. We're still talking about the Qatari jet. We're still talking about the big, beautiful bill. I've seen all sorts of anger and frustration and vitriol in social media about the harmful effects of that particular congressional bowel movement. We're still talking about these things. Trump is a master manipulator only works if you assume that people can only focus on one thing at a time. And while that may be accurate for some, for most of us, it both wildly underestimates and wildly overestimates our attention span. I love that both can be true. Most of us who are well informed can pretty easily keep track of multiple things at once. Most of us who aren't well informed have trouble keeping track of even one issue. It's not really distraction if the audience you're talking about isn't paying attention at all. But I also object to Trump as a master manipulator because it gives him credit for planning this sort of shit, which frankly, nothing I have seen this man do in the past almost 10 years now that he has been a national political figure. Nothing in that time gives me any confidence at all in saying that this guy is able to plan beyond 5-10 minutes into the future. No. There are people in his orbit that are smart enough to be able to manipulate the public conversation this way. Donald Trump is not smart enough to do that. So if we're talking about him as master manipulator, what we're really talking about is him as useful idiot. The second thing that I think is worth talking about very quickly is what I'm calling shut up and sing. Every time any celebrity, any actor, musician, singer, whatever, any comedian, whatever, anytime any celebrity says anything critical about Trump, the MAGA faithful come out with their, "We don't pay you to have opinions. You're a dancing monkey, so dance, monkey," right? Except, no, that's not the way this works. We live in a democracy. Which means that all of us, accountants, construction workers, plumbers, lawyers, bank managers, tinkers, tailors, soldiers, spies, butchers, bakers, candlestick makers, and yes, even actors, singers, and musicians, all of us are responsible for maintaining a basic understanding of our civic duties and political issues. We elect people to carry out our will, not to tell us what to do. So, we may not pay the boss to have opinions. That's true. But for the system to work as designed, he has to have them. He should have them. And a good argument can be made that he has a civic duty to share them as well. I posted a video about that duty last fall when I argued that we should normalize political discussion. A democracy needs this engagement in order for it to work. And yes, we live in a democracy. And every time I'm saying we live in a democracy, I'm doing this little crooked finger, strange, difficult bowel movement face thing, because every time you say we live in a democracy, there's some asshole who says, "Oh yeah, well really, we don't live in a democracy. We live in a constitutional republic, and that's different." Fuck you. No, it's not different. Okay, democracy and constitutional republic mean the same fucking thing in this context. We're talking about a government that is established in such a way as to give the people a voice. Generically, it is referred to as democracy, and it has a bunch of practical iterations, but they are all democracy. I have no patience for that argument. If you intend to make that argument in the comments, just know you're full of bullshit. We both know you're full of bullshit. It is sophistry. If you don't know what you're talking about, then what the hell are you making the comment for? Oh, my God. I get worked up about it. It's a good way to see my blood pressure spike. Is tell me, "Oh, we don't really live in a democracy. We live in a..." Oh, fuck you. Yes, we do. Jesus. But, getting back to my point, the third thing that I was thinking about, once my blood pressure came down, the third thing I was thinking about is, we have this tendency, and I say we because it's a social thing. I don't do it myself, but enough of us do that, okay, I take a certain level of ownership over it. Sorry, today's unofficial sponsor, we're back to Dos Equis, in case you're keeping track at home. We have a tendency to engage in both sidesism, right? Oh, this side does it well, but to be fair, that side does it as well, and this side does, but bullshit. There are certain things that it just doesn't really fit, and this is one of them. I cannot remember the last time liberal or progressive political figures were up in arms over a conservative artist, a conservative actor or singer or musician or whatever. And it might have happened, and I can't remember it. Drop a comment down below if I'm overlooking something obvious. I would appreciate that. But I was thinking about this as I was, working through what I was going to talk about in the video. I was thinking about it. I don't know that I've ever seen that. And that got me thinking about the corollary here, the related thought. Well, how could that happen, right? I mean, despite the fact that if I so much as sneeze, I'm going to bump, reflexively, the spasm will make me bump into a subjectivity notice here in my lair. I can't swing a dead cat around here without hitting a copy of a subjectivity notice somewhere. Despite the fact that I very fervently believe that there's no such thing as objectively good or objectively bad art, there's only art that we like and art that we don't, and as long as we keep that in mind, etc., etc. I'm still going to go out on a limb, even though it may seem hypocritical, and propose that I think it's significantly more likely that 100 years from now, people will still know who Bruce Springsteen is, while Kid Rock is going to fade into obscurity almost immediately upon his death. It's been 150 years, but we still know who Stephen Foster is. We don't remember Will S. Hayes as much. Will S. Hayes was a contemporary of Stephen Foster, and I had to look him up when I was doing research this afternoon because, yes, I do research these things. You don't have to be a classical music fan to recognize names like Beethoven and Bach and Mozart and Brahms and Vivaldi, right? I think there are certain performers, there are certain writers, there are certain artists today who will be remembered. And I'm not saying this because I think they are objectively better than I think this because they've amassed a reputation and a body of work that is sufficient to last after they have died. And I got to thinking about that. I got to thinking about who, if we had the obverse, if we had a liberal politician who was upset with a conservative artist, who would the conservative artist be? Who is the conservative art, the artist who is known for being conservative, the way that Bruce Springsteen is known for being progressive? John Mellencamp is known for being progressive, right? So who is the conservative equivalent? Kid Rock. If we're talking actors, you've got Robert De Niro is known for his progressive politics. John Voight, Kevin Sorbo, James Woods, very good actor. Why are there no conservative actors? Why is there no conservative art? And obviously when I phrase this question, I'm deliberately overstating it, because obviously, yes, I've already given examples, and while we can be petty and talk about whether or not Kevin Sorbo qualifies as an actor, he is an actor. He does the job. He gets the paycheck. So stop with that elitism. So obviously, yes, there is conservative art. There are conservative artists. But why is there so little obviously conservative art? Or obviously conservative artists, I should say. Why are there so few of them? I would argue that partly this is due to self-selection among artists. And I know I'm not particularly original when I point this out. Artists tend to be progressive for the same reason that academics tend to be progressive. Respect for and curiosity about reality. The sad truth is that the current right wing in American politics is grounded on things that are at best unproven, white supremacy, and at worst counterfactual. Immigrants are violent. Voter fraud is rampant. Elon Musk is a genius, etc. If you're trying to create art that depicts or reflects reality, that reliance on the unprovable or the counterfactual is going to be a stumbling block. This is also one of the reasons why I'm always amused every time I hear people refer to colleges as as indoctrination centers. Colleges just indoctrinate. They spread their progressive mind cooties into the next year. I went to college, and I am progressive. I am not progressive because I went to college. I went to college because I am progressive. People who think that college is indoctrinative, if that's a word, are getting the causal relationship backwards, I think. So partly it's that. Artists value reality. Reality is inherent to the medium of their art. And current right-wing politics frequently runs perpendicular to reality. But mostly, I would argue that the dearth of conservatives in art and artists is due to the conflict between artistic expression and propaganda. And again, I know I'm not original in pointing this out. But if your primary purpose in creating an artwork is to make a political statement, then the art of the work has to take a back seat. This, by the way, this is not a criticism. I'm not saying that if the art takes a back seat, the work itself cannot be artistic. Political satirists are legitimate arts. Political satirists are legitimate artists. But if you are making inherently or forthrightly political art, that limits what you can do. And again, for that art to work, for that satire, for example, to work, it's got to be based on something that your audience understands. You've got to have some common ground. It has to be based on reality. Your audience has to accept it as real. As a result, because conservative beliefs depend on the unprovable or the counterfactual, there's little common ground between artist an art. You can preach to the choir, but no one will understand you unless they've got the code book, the phrase book. If I watch Fox News 24/7, then I know what all the buzzwords are, and I'm going to pick up on the references. But if I'm not part of that bubble, I'm not going to get it. And because I disregard anything that isn't directly part of the bubble, I disregard the reality that everybody else shares, I can't communicate outside that bubble. Even when we think about art forms that are inherently conservative, and here I'm thinking about Westerns. I've been watching a lot of Westerns lately. I've been classic Westerns. Yeah, I got off on the kick by rewatching Tombstone and Silverado and Appaloosa for, I think, the 87th time. But that led me down the rabbit hole, and I've been watching Magnificent Seven, High Noon. I watched that again not too long ago. A Fistful of Dollars, which I think is just hilarious, in ways that Sergio Leone definitely doesn't want me to think it's hilarious. John Wayne Westerns, The Sons of Katie Elder, I think that's a hoot of a movie. El Dorado, Rio Bravo, right? I've been watching a lot of these movies lately. The Western is an inherently conservative genre. But even here, the need for the common ground to base the story on means there's still going to be progressive elements in there. The hero, the conservative icon, the cowboy hero, the lone virile man who's pulled himself up by his bootstraps and is, by God, manly. He can fell the greatest of foes with a single punch. Oh, he's a man. Even that guy, when the range war starts, the range war is going to be between the evil rancher who owns all of the land and the poor put upon townspeople that the rancher has, been terrorizing or has been victimizing. Even in a Western, that cultural conservative icon, the Western hero, is going to side with labor over capital every time. The only conservative art I can think of where the equivalent of the ranch owner is the hero is Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged, which is proof, if proof were needed, that conservative art is a contradiction in terms. And that's what I've been thinking about this week, thanks to the kerfuffle between Bruce Springsteen and, in the Battle of Wits, very much an unarmed man. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Have I forgotten something that I should have addressed? The liberal politician who took umbrage at the conservative artist? Drop that note down below. I always love hearing from you. While you're down there, go ahead and click the like button if you enjoyed today's video. I appreciate that. While you're clicking the like button, if you haven't already done so, click the subscribe button as well. It costs you nothing, but it means the world to me, so I very much appreciate it. If you do subscribe, go ahead and click the bell for notifications. The YouTube folk appreciate that, so on their behalf, I thank you. It has something to do with the algorithm, which, as we all remember, was the original intended villain of the movie Rio Bravo. It's what drove Dean Martin to drink. Anyway, thanks again for hanging out with me today, and I hope that the rest of your day is jubilant. See you soon.